And welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates viewers. Now, for this morning's discussions, we are getting into the conversations about whether or not we're going to be having a new airline operating, well, whether it's between Trinidad and Tobago and outside. Of course, this was an announcement made by Chief Secretary Fali Augustin just about a week ago right here. And it's very interesting. There were no details that were given at that time when he made the announcement, but we expect as the time goes on, we will know more. But the news of the negotiations happening with a new airline has raised some concerns. And to address some of those concerns or to kind of shed light as to why there are some concerns, we are being joined right now by Mr. Ramesh Lutchmedial, and he is the former Director General of the Trinidad and Tobago Civil Aviation Authority. So good morning and welcome to you, sir. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning. I'm fine, Kandace.
All right, great. Now, so first of all, I want to get your perspective on how does it work within Trinidad and Tobago, within the confines of the law, in terms of when we are, as a country, seeking a new airline to operate, whether it's between the islands or to have airlift into one of our airports.
Well, firstly, there's definitely we have to differentiate between a new airline, a startup airline, an airline that's been formed, or an already existing airline that has not flown into Trinidad and Tobago before that intends to fly into Trinidad and Tobago. So, in the case of a new airline, they have to go through a very detailed process to become certificated as an air operator in accordance with the standards established by the International Civil Aviation Organization, and the responsibility under law for certificating any new airline is that of the Trinidad and Tobago Civil Aviation Authority. Secondly, if we have an existing airline that wants to fly into Trinidad and or Tobago, they're already certificated by their home state, they will have to apply again to the Trinidad and Tobago Civil Aviation Authority for an international commercial license to be able to operate. And only the TTCA is empowered under law, one, to certificate any new airline that proposes to engage in commercial air transport, or an already existing airline that wants to operate into Trinidad and Tobago or between Trinidad and Tobago.
Now, we know that as government officials, I mean, especially like when we travel to, let's say, World Travel Market or ITB in Germany, there is usually a meeting with different airlines and so on as we're trying to improve the airlift to the destination and so on. At what point does the Civil Aviation Authority and all the other legal bodies within the country get involved with those conversations to firm up or to allow an airline to operate?
Well, the THA is in order by having discussions with airlines at these different tourism and fora and encourage airlines to operate into Trinidad and Tobago. There's nothing wrong with that. However, once an airline decides to operate into Tobago or Trinidad, they must apply for the international commercial license. And that application has to go to the Trinidad and Tobago Civil Aviation Authority. Now, it is clear initially there was news media reports that suggested that there was going to be the formation of a new airline. But information coming out suggests that the THA is talking to Condor from Germany, Virgin Atlantic, British Airways, and these are airlines that have already been operating into Tobago and have had approvals and licenses. So it's only a matter of renewing the licenses, and there are conditions to be satisfied. It's all spelled out in the Civil Aviation Regulation number 17 that specifies what the applicant is required to provide to support uh, the grant of a license.
All right. And then in terms of operating between the islands as the operating the air bridge, now we have Caribbean Airlines operating currently, has the monopoly. What's the requirements for that as well? Is there any special stipulations? Like, help us understand how that all works.
Well, flights between two internal points in any country is called cabotage rights. And countries normally do not grant cabotage rights to foreign airlines except in special circumstances, like in certain parts of Australia, where Australian carriers do not operate because it's uneconomical. Airlines outside of Australia have been given approval to operate. However, recently we signed a revised CARICOM multilateral air service agreement, and that agreement allows a CARICOM airline, meaning an airline owned by CARICOM citizens, to fly between internal points in a country. So that if, for example, the at 1974 is still operating, they can fly between Trinidad and Tobago. You have SVGA from St. Vincent. If they wanted to fly between Trinidad, they can do that. You have Trans-Guyana Airways from Guyana, and under that agreement, they can fly between Trinidad and Tobago. But extra CARICOM airline, for example, like uh, American Eagle, they cannot fly between Trinidad and Tobago. The treaty doesn't allow that.
Was there ever a point that we had any external airlines flying between the islands?
No, there have been no instance. We had given Liat, when I was Director General, we had given Liat in 2002 permission to fly between Trinidad and Tobago to supplement Caribbean Airlines. But at that time, it was BWI. The second point I wanted to make, and I saw that appear in the newspaper, where the THA was talking about wet leasing. The THA cannot wet lease an aircraft. And there's a very subtle legal difference between a wet lease and a charter. They can charter aircraft, but wet leasing is normally done between one air operator and another air operator. So if there's an airline with whom the THA wants a wet lease, they cannot wet lease it between that airline and the THA because the THA is not an air operator. And therefore, they can facilitate a wet lease between, let's say, some other foreign carrier and Caribbean Airlines, but they cannot it cannot be between the THA and that foreign airline. And I think the other point I need to make to you is that under Section 2601 of the THA Act, it prescribes a matter for which the THA shall not have responsibility as defined in the sixth schedule of the THA Act, and it lists, among other things, national security, immigration, meteorology, and civil aviation. So the responsibility for civil aviation in Tobago is that of the central government through the Trinidad and Tobago Civil Aviation Authority. They have no responsibility for civil aviation, and the law specifies that in very, very unambiguous terms.
No, at a situation here in Tobago where we are solely dependent on Caribbean Airlines. And I mean, I'm sure you know by now the complaints that a lot of Tobagonians have in terms of, we want more from Caribbean Airlines, but we're not able to get more because we don't have the power to make them give us more in terms of flights and so on. So then where does this leave Tobago in terms of, being able to supplement or being able to do something about the air bridge capacity for the island?
Okay. To start with, Tobago tourism economy depends heavily on reliable air transportation linkages. Caribbean airlines have been providing air transportation linkages, but at a tremendous loss to the airline because what passengers are being charged is way below the economic cost of providing a seat. Now, very interestingly, Caribbean Airlines provided some statistics that they published in the newspapers in early November, and they were saying that between the 1st of January to the end of October, they provided 576,620 seats, of which 58,533 seats were unused that people did not travel. And that's a lot. So when you calculate that amount of unused seats by the economic cost, during that period, CAL would have lost 32,193,000. That averages about over a little over $3 million per month that CAL is losing. And at the end of the day, it is the taxpayers that subsidizes CAL and keep CAL afloat. So, in my opinion, Caribbean Airlines will be making every effort to provide enough capacity based on a mean demand. At the end of the day, you have to understand the airline industry is very safety sensitive, it is highly regulated, and it is very highly capital intensive, and it cannot be likened to have a maxi taxi service. So therefore, Caribbean Islands have to be able to run a schedule that allows someone in the first instance to provide that capacity for passengers who want to travel between Trinidad and Tobago, but at the same time to minimize their losses because they are taking some serious losses on that average route. I'm just giving
No,
you the figures.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I just give you the figures, how many unused seats and what that costs Caribbean Airlines. Because what people fail to remember, Candice, is that an airline seat is a perishable product. It costs X amount of dollars to provide that seat. And when that seat is not used on a flight, it perishes. It cannot be sold the next day. It's not like a loaf of bread, that you didn't sell it today, you can sell it tomorrow. Once that aircraft flies with that seat empty, it is money going down the drain. Now, airlines are able to do their economic studies and work out what's the break-even load factor for the different aircraft types and so on. And they then have to determine, how they're going to schedule their flights to minimize their losses and maximize their revenues. But in the case of the air bridge, because the government has a public service obligation to provide those air transportation linkages, Caribbean Airlines, as a state owned airline, has been providing that service at tremendous losses. So it's
So
not
then,
fair, in my view, it is not fair to say that CAL is not providing adequate capacity whenever there are long weekends or special events like Tobago Carnival, they increase the capacity to meet the demand. Yeah.
so in a situation where we might not be fully satisfied, because we understand from Caribbean Airlines standpoint, and you pretty much laid it out there, what Carl's concerns are and what is their situation they're dealing with in terms of being able to provide capacity. But in a situation where maybe Tobagonians might be feeling a little bit differently, and and maybe wanting to explore having an additional carrier. Now, if that carrier wants to carry the losses and that sort of thing, that would be the deal that they would have to work out. Now, is this something that the Civil Aviation Authority and the bodies at B would be able to accommodate?
Well, a new carrier on the route to compete with Caribbean Airlines, the government will have to approve the airfare because they're the ones who approve the airfare. And recently it was increased by $100 so that when passengers were paying $300 return, the government was paying $100 subsidy to car. It went up to 400. They're still getting the same 100 subsidy, so that the government will have to approve the airfare of any new carrier coming to operate on the domestic average, even if it's a local carrier. So if let's say some people got up on the 499 call Tobago X and they want to fly between Tobago, the government, because you can't, there must be what we call um, competitive pricing. You cannot have unfair competition, so that at the end of the day, the government will have to approve that fare and whether or
Is
not that airline will operate.
and is this what's stated in the law?
Well, under the regulation number 17, it is not stated very clearly like that, but it's implied that the government will have to, because at the end of the day, all civil activities falls under the Minister of Works and Transport, who has that responsibility. And by extension, he would then have to go to the cabinet to seek approval. Yeah. For
All right.
example, when I was a sitting director general and RedJet applied for a permit to fly in front of Tobago to compete with Caribbean Airlines, I sought the approval of the minister before they were granted that license. And that minister happened to be Jack Horn at the time.
All right. Now, we just got just about a minute left for our interview this morning, and I just wanted to thank you again so much for being on with us. But before you go, I mean, is there anything that you want to leave with Tobago? Because as we're trying to understand this whole situation as to how it's supposed to work within the confines of the law and so on, and just to add whatever clarity, because of course, for a long time a lot of Tobagonians have been saying, why don't the THA just get their own airline so that we could operate to our whims and fancies, or to operate to our needs. So is there anything that you would like to leave with us as you go?
But I didn't know what should happen. Clearly, there's need to rationalize air transportation to Trinidad and Tobago. And there are many organizations. We have the Tobago Division of Tourism and Transport and the Tobago uh, Tourism Company Limited or the THA. You have the Tobago Chamber of Commerce. You have a number of organizations in Tobago. So that I would suggest that all the stakeholders get together and have a meeting with the central government to try and resolve this issue, including Caribbean Islands. The Caribbean Islands teacher are key players in this whole scenario, and therefore all other stakeholders should get together and meet with the central government, meet with the minister or his permanent secretary. And there's also a committee called this. It's a cabinet-appointed committee called the Standing Negotiating Committee Air Service Agreements, and they should also get that committee involved. Incidentally, there used to be a teacher rep on that committee who I understand has since retired and is yet to be replaced by the teacher. So we need to get all the stakeholders involved, use all the existing mechanisms that exist, and hopefully we can resolve that issue. The long-standing issue of domestic air travel between Trinidad and Tobago.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much, Mr. Lutchmedial, for giving us that perspective and a little insight as to how it works, especially from a civil aviation authority standpoint.
Well, as I say, I am the retired Director General, and I'm not authorized in any way to speak on behalf of the Supervision Authority, but given my expertise, I can surely give advice for free.
Thank you so much.
Thank
All
you.
right, viewers. Well, that's it for this segment, but we got a lot more coming up for you on the show this morning, so please don't go anywhere.